Welcome back everyone to the weekly Mailbox, your chance to ask me questions about anything you would like in the world of Formula 1. However, today's Mailbox, there's a slight little twist to spice things up. If you haven't noticed, it is episode 44 and as such, I've decided it'd be fun to do a Lewis Hamilton special. A driver that, though he is dominating Formula 1 at the moment, and ever since I've been doing YouTube on Formula 1, he's been world champion every single season. But he's a driver I often find myself not really talking a lot about. So again, number 44 came around and I thought, you know what? Let's just have a little bit of fun. So as always, we've got 5 questions from YouTube, Twitter, Instagram. So if you want to ask your questions for next week, which will just be a normal episode, feel free to do so on all of those platforms. But we'll start with question number 1, which comes from Comrade Corbin, who asks, how would the turbo hybrid era have turned out if Lewis Hamilton had stayed at McLaren? Alonso may have stayed at Ferrari, which stops Seb moving, for example. And this is always a fun one, and it's one that I've seen, I think maybe before this season started, the race did a little bit of an explanation about how things would have gone down. And it's one, of course, I've considered and thought about myself, but never really put it into words. And thinking about if Hamilton hadn't moved to Mercedes at the end of 2012 and 2013, and how would the hybrid era have turned out? I don't think Hamilton would still be there to this day. Hamilton is too good of a driver to have slipped back not only into that midfield, to be at the back of the field like McLaren were in 2015, in 2016, and not so much 16 and 17, but certainly if 13 wasn't great for McLaren, 14 wasn't great either, even though they had a Mercedes engine. And I think Hamilton may have stayed in the hope that that Honda partnership, that his hero Ayrton Senna was able to get so much success from in the late 80s and early 90s. Maybe that little bit of a dream Hamilton may have stuck with, a little bit like how Alonso returned to McLaren to try and be that figurehead of that partnership. So potentially Hamilton would have stayed, but I certainly think by now in 2020 he would have moved on. Where to? Well, that's another big question. Certainly though, a team like Ferrari, I mean, I know you've said Alonso may have stayed and also Seb as well, but I think Alonso, who already would have been coming to the end of his career, if Hamilton was on the market, they would have gone for him. And I think also Red Bull, actually, if Vettel had moved on, and though they had Ricciardo, I also think they would have potentially looked into the option of bringing in Lewis Hamilton due to the fact that Kvyat had only done 1 season in Formula 1 by the time he moved up to Red Bull. They obviously weren't interested in promoting Jean-Eric Vergne, so I think actually they may have even taken the risk of bringing in a Lewis Hamilton. Would McLaren have done any better with Hamilton at the wheel? Maybe, but I still think they had some pretty cheeky lineups after Hamilton left. Button, Perez isn't too bad. It's not world class, I wouldn't say, but certainly Perez in his early years was really hungry to prove himself in Formula 1, and in 2013 Button was more than capable. 2014 K-Mag came in, and I would argue that was his best season in Formula 1. A little bit rash and a few too many incidents, I think, which is why McLaren ultimately let him go. And then of course Alonso came in, so I think if Hamilton stayed, maybe they could have got a couple more podiums in 2014 with that Mercedes engine. But I think realistically, the up and down wave they've been riding since Hamilton left, I don't realistically think that would have changed. And for Lewis, I think he would have moved on by now. And I think it would have soured his time at McLaren. I think we all look back at his time there and think how great it was. Though by the end of it, I think Hamilton had had enough of the constant reliability issues, strategy blunders. I think now, as a fan base, we look back at that for the most part as a great time. Whereas we look back at Alonso, who went back to McLaren, as a bit of a torrid time for the Spaniard. So, world champions wise, I think Rosberg could have been a multiple world champion, and if Schumacher had stayed at Mercedes, even he potentially, if he stayed for 2 more seasons, 2014, he could even be an 8-time world champion. That would be awesome. But then I think if Schumacher left, who would have Mercedes brought into the team? They were kind of looking to still have a strong driver alongside Nico Rosberg. They could have maybe bought in Kimi Raikkonen instead of him going to Ferrari. Maybe they would have bought in Felipe Massa. Maybe they would have bought in Fernando Alonso themselves. But I think Nico Rosberg actually would be the driver that would benefit out of this entire loop. But I'd love to know your thoughts in the comments section below. Question number 2 comes from Marta. When Hamilton retires, do you think he will do any other type of racing, or will he focus on fashion/music only? And a nice little comment at the end, so thank you for that. This one, I really don't know. If you'd have asked me 6 months ago, I would have probably said Hamilton will do 2021, and then if he wins the World Championship, if he claims 8 world titles, he'll leave, he'll do his fashion, he'll do his music, and he'll live a happy life. Now 2021 has been pushed back. I'm not too sure if I see Hamilton retiring for quite some time. I said it in my predictions video, I think it was, my 2021 driver lineups. I think Hamilton could have another 5, 6, maybe even 7 more years in Formula 1. I think he's missing Formula 1 at the moment, looking at some of the content he's putting out online. He's returned to Twitter as well. Not that that has much to do with the fact if he's racing or not, but I think he is missing that aspect. And I think he's one of those drivers, I mean, this could all be a load of rubbish, but from my perspective, I think he's one of those drivers that is going to want to stay in Formula 1 longer and will have kind of experienced retirement at the moment, like all of them are. And I think it will push him to say, you know what, I'd like a couple more years in Formula 1. Do I think he'll go elsewhere after? That's a bit more of a question. However, I do think, and oh my goodness me, this is going to come out of my mouth, and not many of you are going to like this. I do think he would consider Formula E. I'll quickly explain. I think Formula E will be an interesting option to Hamilton because he's so interested in the environment. He's so interested in sustainability. He's obviously a vegetarian or vegan, I think he has evolved into now. And that's a core part of the LH44 brand. And I think for Hamilton, Mercedes are already set up in Formula E. Hamilton's made it very clear that he wants to stay with Mercedes for the rest of his career. He started there, he wants to finish there. And actually, I think he could do a lot of good for Formula E. And I think for Hamilton, if Formula 1, it's kind of lost that edge for him a little bit in 5 or 6, 7 years down the line, I think that could be a fun option to explore for at least 1 or 2 seasons. Do I think that's likely? I'm 50-50 on that. I'm not saying Hamilton will 100% go there, but I don't realistically see him going to IndyCar, NASCAR, Le Mans. I don't see him as that kind of driver. I probably would say MotoGP more than those other series, but Formula E would be the one I would single out of all of the different races Hamilton would be interested in. Maybe even esports as well, but I think Formula E is the only one. And do I think he will focus on fashion and music only? I'm not too sure about that. I think certainly they'll be the first and the main priorities straight away after retiring, but I don't know. I think there is a real love and passion for racing for Lewis Hamilton, so it wouldn't surprise me to see him in a role similar to what Niki Lauda did at Mercedes over the past few years since the start of the hybrid era. It's another one where Hamilton is, though he is such a star, not just in Formula 1 but around the world, he's a global superstar and ambassador for our sports. I think he's one of those enigmas where you don't really know what he's thinking. And that's kind of why so many people love him, and I believe it's one of the factors why he's done so well in Formula 1. But yeah, I've said my piece. Formula E, potentially, and we will leave that there. I don't know why I get all defensive about Formula E sometimes. You guys have certainly warmed up to it over the last couple of years, and I appreciate you all for trying it. If you haven't, then I would recommend. If you haven't, you don't like it, fair play. But most of you, I'm glad you gave it a go and are enjoying it. Looking forward to that and Formula 1 returning very soon. Question number 3 is from Reese James. I think that's Reese James. I think I finally got a correct pronunciation. There we go. It's only taken me 44 episodes. Did Hamilton have the greatest rookie season in Formula 1 history? He finished his first 9 races of his career in the podium, which seems impossible. And it still does to me. I mean, thinking about that, and thinking back to 2007, it was the first season I watched all the way through. I'd watched bits and bobs before. I was never really that interested, and I've always said that the moment that got me into Formula One was Jenson Button's first victory. I vividly remember that, jumping around the screen. So pretty much since I've watched Formula One, I've been kind of watching Hamilton's career, which has been really fun, of course, and being a Brit, that certainly helps. And now we're watching the likes of Leclerc and Verstappen, and we've also had Vettel in that time period as well. We've had some really strong drivers. But certainly Lewis Hamilton's rookie season, since I've been watching Formula One, is comfortably the best. Like you say, those first 9 races on the podium, but not only that, 1 point off the World Championship in his first season. And not only that, the other 2 drivers, the one who won was Kimi Raikkonen, who had had plenty of experience in Formula One, and also Massa was kind of used as a rear gunner in that season for the second half, so big advantage for Raikkonen there. But also Hamilton's teammate was Fernando Alonso, the back-to-back previous world champion, and you add all that up, the pressure that he already had going into Formula One after he'd done such impressive work in his junior career, to then smash it like he did. Though there was a slight bottle in China where he ended in the pit lane, and ultimately that mistake in China did cost him the World Championship that year. Apart from that, pretty much flawless from that first season. And again, you can look back, I mean, technically, Giuseppe Farina won the Formula One World Championship in his rookie season, if you want to count that, all the way back in 1950, but he'd been racing before, and technically we did have Grand Prix before the first World Championship, so we won't count that. And I'm sure drivers like, when I was researching for my Senna Legend series, he had a fantastic first season in Formula One with Tolman, of course, got that incredible podium at Monaco, but I wasn't around back then, so I can't comment on that as easily. But from first-hand experience, and since 2006/2007, Hamilton comfortably the best. Apart from that, Max Verstappen's was okay his first year in Formula One. Norris was all right last year. Russell, hard to judge. Charles Leclerc did a really good job. He was the standout performer in 2018 from the rookies in that field. I would also say Romain Grosjean in 2012, his first full rookie season, a few podiums in there, not too far off teammate Kimi Raikkonen, though I'll take that back instantly because I'm being a fanboy and forgetting the race ban and crashes. But it still wasn't a bad season overall, finishing inside the top 10 comfortably. But again, I'm struggling to think of anyone on the level of Hamilton. And you could argue that he was in a race-winning car straight away. And you compare that to Russell last year. That is impossible because Russell was in a car that couldn't even finish within 2 seconds of the closest car in front of them. So it's always going to be difficult comparing drivers. But I would certainly say Hamilton, from my time, has had the greatest impact on Formula One in their rookie season. I hope that kind of makes sense. But certainly, I'd love to know your thoughts if you've been watching Formula One a little bit longer. And also, actually, for some of you that have only watched over the last couple of years, who's impressed you most in their rookie seasons? I would love to know in the comments down below. Question number 4, continuing the Lewis Hamilton hype train today, comes from F1 Fan. Just a fun type of question. And I'll tell you what, F1 Fan, those are the questions I absolutely love. What if Hamilton had to move to another team? Which would it be? So it's kind of the opposite to what we had in question 1, talking about if he never left McLaren. This is, if he had to move to a team now, where would he go? And there's always talk about him going to Ferrari. I don't see that one. That's not one I think fits well for the brand of Hamilton. I don't think it's one that necessarily aligns with the ethics and the culture of Ferrari. Red Bull, a similar kind of situation. Yes, they would love to have Hamilton in that car, but alongside Verstappen, no, I don't see that happening. And they're a team that very much like to promote from within and really make an emphasis on youth in Formula One, which is why they're unique, and it's been the key to a lot of their success over the last 10 years. And away from that, it would be a risk for Hamilton to move, but like you say, F1 fan, this is a bit of fun. So would he go to Renault? It's a team I don't think is going to offer Hamilton anything new. It's going to be another corporate team like Mercedes, like it was at McLaren, and they're kind of stuck in that midfield. They could do a jump forward, but again, I don't think that's one that's going to interest Lewis that much. Racing Point? Well, Aston Martin, we might say. I think that would be really fun. I would love to see Hamilton at Aston Martin, and a new project, something for him to work on. I've mentioned that with Sebastian Vettel. That could be something that interests him if a seat is available. And for this quick mailbox, we're just going to assume that there are seats available at all these teams. So certainly I think Hamilton would relish a challenge like that. And I think, from a fan perspective, it'd be really fun to see him jump back into that midfield just to see how good of a driver he truly is up against drivers we already know are great in that midfield. McLaren, it would be really fun to see him go back there, but that's kind of a team I'm enjoying their driver lineup. For Hamilton, though, I always like it when a driver kind of does a round robin of their career, like Raikkonen starting off at Sauber, ending at Sauber. I quite like it when drivers do that. It's so silly. It really is just a pointless little thing, but it would be fun to see Hamilton go back to McLaren one day. Alfa Romeo, maybe. They've got a great history in 1950s, 1960s with Fangio, Ascari. Would be another brilliant world champion in their car, but are they a team going forward to the front? I don't think so, but and it's another one I would quite like to see Hamilton in an Alfa Romeo if they weren't posed as a Ferrari B team. If they were on their own, I think that would be another really fun one. Alpha Tauri, I mean, they're a fashion brand. It would, again, be something quite unique, and it would line up with the Hamilton brand, but again, a B team, very unlikely. And the two remaining teams, I think there's only two left, apologies if I forgot one. Haas, I'm obviously going to say yes all day long. And for Hamilton, he lives in LA, he loves America. It's another one of those teams where you think if they had a little bit more investment, it's one where I can see Hamilton going to end his career. I don't know why. I just think it's such a fresh and unique team and unique challenge. Hamilton may go for it. Again, it all depends on what he's looking for. And it's a team that are quite open. They've been more than transparent that their goal in Formula One is to race. It's nothing corporate. And I think a lot of drivers prefer that side of things. And I think for Hamilton, maybe, if he's trying something just for 1 year, something different, it could certainly be an avenue to go down. And Williams, if they can just survive, my goodness me, getting in a driver like Hamilton, for Hamilton, maybe taking more of a driver-manager role, doing a bit of both, could be really fun to end off his career as well. And again, a team with plenty of history and a team I would love to see Hamilton drive for. I think that's all of them. Of course, I would say Haas would be my number one pick. I think Aston Martin would be... Actually, Aston Martin number one is what I would go with. Haas number 2, Williams number 3. But again, I'd love to know your thoughts in the comments below. However, as we move on to our final question today, this is our real audience participation, which means I want to know your thoughts in the comment section down below. Comes from Goky, G-O-K-Y. If you had to pick one moment... This is difficult. If you had to pick one moment that defines the career of Lewis Hamilton, which moment would you choose? This is so difficult. Because initially, the one that always pops into my head, and like it does for most people, is that Glock. That final corner overtake for the World Championship. But then I thought about it a little bit more. And I thought, though it's probably the most dramatic moment of Hamilton's career, does it really define his career? It's his first title, and I don't want to say it was luck, because it certainly wasn't luck, that 2008 season, but I think Hamilton has had plenty of fantastic moments in recent history that I kind of, again, think that we won't truly appreciate until he retires. It's something I've been considering during this chaos at the moment, where we've had not a lot much else to do. But my answer is his pole lap in Singapore 2018. The best pole lap I think a lot of us have ever witnessed. Almost faultless, and I say almost, to me it looks faultless, but Hamilton himself says there's still little things he can notice. And for me, the fact that he says that, the fact that he knows there was still a little bit more on the line, is just kind of proof that he's always aiming for perfection. And though he was still so much better than everyone else on that day, he still thinks he can give more. So that's what I'm going to go with for defining moment. Maybe it's a little bit boring. So again, I'd love to know your thoughts in the comment section down below. But that is it for our Lewis Hamilton special of the weekly mailbox. As always, if you want to ask your questions for next week, comment section down below. YouTube community post will go out sometime next week. Twitter, Instagram, all that good stuff. Thank you all very much for watching. If you are new, feel free to subscribe. Like if you enjoyed, dislike if you didn't. I hope you're all well. I hope you're all keeping safe. And I'll see you in the next one.